Great. So this morning we're joined by Anthony Odru-Dentra, who is a labor economist and labor statistician at the Labor Statistics Unit of the Ghana Statistical Service. And he's joined us for a conversation on the fact that some 1.9 million Ghanaians, aged between 15 and 35, are not in employment, education, nor training. Anthony, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Great. Before we get into even the numbers, help us understand, for instance, why is this important? Why is it important to know the number of people that are not in education, employment, and training?
So, thank you, and good morning to your cherished listeners as well. So, and also let me also say good morning to the government statistician, the person of Professor Samuel Enim, who has asked me to represent him this morning on this matter. So, I think first of all, this indicator, the youth not in employment, education, or training, is an SDG indicator. I think that fact needs to be established. SDG indicator 8.6.1. We know that the goal 8 of SDG looks at decent work and economic growth. And so this indicator actually comes under that goal. And so looking at the youth being in productive, employment. And so for us in Ghana Statistical Service, the SDG coordination is at Ghana Statistical Service. And so it's important for us to measure the progress that we are making in terms of whether we are achieving the SDG 2020 SDGs or not. So this is one of the reasons why we had to come up with this indicator to see what progress we are making in terms of the SDGs.
And as we talk about the progress that we're making with this particular SDG, for those who are listening to us and for the policymakers, what is the significance of this data?
So, yes, as you know, in GSS, our core mandate is to come up with official statistics for evidence-based decision-making. So, if such a data or statistic is out there, given this number of our youth who are neither in employment or education or training, then it calls for concern. So for us, we don't formulate policy. So then it's up to the policymakers to look at it and to see what policies they can put in place to ensure that this menace is kept. And so we expect that the policymakers will engage with these statistics and then come up with programs or policies that will reduce this indicator, because if this indicator reduces, to zero, then that's the best. It means that we have our youth either being engaged in employment or in some kind of education or training.
You say if this is the case, then it calls for concern. Also because you're an economist, a labor economist at that, what are some of the concerns that you believe this raises if not addressed?
All right, so maybe I'll just give two from the perspective of the socioeconomic, if you like, challenges. So this is this group. The need group is termed as idle youth, if you like. A measure of idle youth. So what we are seeing is that this is non-utilized labor of the youth population. So if you look at this socially, we all know the saying that the devil finds work for idle hands. So if we have this proportion of the youth population not engaged in education or employment, then clearly they would want to find something else to do because their potential are not being tapped. So if you look at it from the social point of view, then you are looking at the consequences. That would come given this number. And so then they can be involved in social vices which would not speak well for the country, because yes, they have the energy, they want to find something to do. So they can find themselves in things that are not, if you like, decent, because they want to do anything to make a living. Then on the economic perspective, if again, referring to the SDG Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. So if you have this proportion of the youth whose labor is not being tapped, then obviously they wouldn't be able to contribute to national growth. Talking about the GDP, labor productivity will be low, and so that is why it's important that these ones either they develop themselves to get the requisite skills or the essential skills needed for them to have employability skills to be able to get into the labor market so that they can contribute to the economic development of the country and in particular the GDP. I mean, talking about the labor productivity.
So let's look at the figures. Share the figures with us. Break them down for us. Of the 1.9 million, which areas dominate? What percentage of them are females, males? Share them with us.
All right. So as rightly indicated in the report, so this number we have about 1.2 million, being female against 715,691. And so what it means is that young women, within this age bracket, are more likely to be in need than their male counterparts. And it's not surprising because already if you look at the labor market participation, labor force participation, we have more males, being engaged in the labor market compared to females. And so it's not surprising because then you have more females who will be outside the labor market. In other words, who will not be in the labor force, employment. And the need is looking at those who are neither in employment or in education or training. So I'm just giving a basis for which more, males are likely to be in need as compared to their male counterparts. And it could also be, this suggests that either these women or the females are into what we call the house chores or care activities. We know that women are more likely to be engaged in unpaid care work or care activities, house chores, than males, because males would want to. That's why they are, even now, the ILO is calling for data or statistics on unpaid care work, because you are more likely to have a woman or a female, to be at home taking care of this care work than a female. And so that suggests the basis for which there are more women, outside the labor, in need compared to the female, to the males.
Okay, yeah. So 1.2 million women.
Yes.
Compared to 715,000 men. Exactly. Which region has the most?
Okay, so yes, again, as in the release, so Greater Accra, tops the regions with, as was mentioned, Greater Accra has about that's 565,360. That's over 500,000. And then followed by the Ashanti region, Central region, Eastern region, and then Western regions. And again, this is not surprising because let me just even speak about unemployment. I'm sure as you have heard us in our releases, we say that unemployment is an urban phenomenon in that, yes, there are more people likely to be unemployed in urban settings compared to the rural settings, which is true. And so if you look at the NEET rate, the NEET rate is actually a broader share of youth unemployment. In that youth unemployment is, or unemployment, but in this case, once we are talking about youth, let's limit it to the youth. So youth unemployment is measured by the unemployed youth over the labor force, that is the employed and the unemployed. So you get the youth unemployment rate. Now the NEET goes beyond that, because with the NEET, you are also including those youth or persons who are outside the labor force. But remember that in computing the unemployment, you use the labor force as the denominator. Yeah. But this one, you have to go beyond. So you have to now use the working age population, which includes those outside the labor force. So the youth who are outside the labor force, who are also not employed nor in education, are also part of the denominator. So then the NEET is actually, relatively, or comparatively big, higher than the youth unemployment. Now, the reason for which Greater Accra, tops, is basically that Greater Accra being the capital city, the urban-rural migration, everybody would want to come to the capital to serve for jobs that are not available. So it's not surprising that Greater Accra is leading in terms of the regional differentials, followed by Ashanti region, which is also unequally. So I term these regions as, if you like, developed, in Ghana. Yeah. So once you mention Greater Accra, I mean, a lot of urban, communities, Ashanti, Central, Western. These are all, if you like, developed regions compared to, some of the other regions, let's say the northern region. So it's not surprising that a lot of these youth are in these regions, but they are not in education, neither are they in employment.
But isn't that a surprising thing? That because they're supposed to be the commercial hub, more or less,
Exactly.
of the country, Accra and Kumasi. These are the commercial and administrative hubs. So you're coming to Accra or Kumasi to get something to do. But unfortunately, these people are neither in education, employment, nor training. One would have expected that in these parts of the world, of the country, you would have most people trying to get something, because at least if you're not in education, you're undergoing some training or some employment, isn't it?
So I think maybe later when we are proposing some policies, I mean, these are some of the issues that government needs to, put in place. So you are right. So in terms of, the definition of the need, again, let me also stress that. So at the time of the data collection, once you are collecting data, I mean, and this is coming from the annual household income and expenditure data, which is collected quarterly. So what it means is that given the reference period, so you have within the 7 days period. So they wanted to know at that time. So it doesn't mean that they do not have education, except that within that reference period, they were not in education, neither were they in employment or some sort of training. So yes, I mean, regarding your question, that is true, but either the jobs are not being created or they don't have the assistance that they need to engage engage in or get into the labor market, or there are no opportunities for them to better their education. And so we say that if you have this higher need rate, what it means is that then there are barriers, institutional barriers to, as it were, access employment or educational opportunities. So yes, it's a challenge that I think that we need to find solution to addressing it.
Great. So you've talked about Accra. You've talked about Ashanti, then
Western,
Central, Western,
Eastern.
Eastern. So
Yeah.
yes, so mainly within the south.
Exactly.
What's the situation in northern Ghana? Why do they have low numbers?
Well, so yes, so if you look at northern region, the, if you like, the economic activity, main economic activities are within the agricultural, sector, and so that's why we say that even when it comes to unemployment, there are more. You are likely to have more people, maybe employed in the rural setting. It is because in the rural sector you can be engaged in some form of agricultural activity. So I think a lot of these activities take place in the northern region compared to the south, and hence giving these differentials.
Great.
It may not be white collar job, but I think somebody can be engaged, because if you are talking about employment, you can be engaged in an economic activity, even if it's for an hour, and then in exchange for pay or profit. So maybe some agricultural activity, you gather some stakes that you sold, that you got something. It's an activity. And so when we are computing the employment category or the employed population, you will be part of that employed population compared to, the southern sector.
Great. I mean, I know, because of our time, I know that in a lot of the things that you do, you sometimes also add policy recommendations. What are the policy recommendations from the Ghana Statistical Service?
So yes, thank you. So I think the first policy recommendation, if you wouldn't mind, and I just put some point down. So yes, the first one will be, increasing investment with potential for youth employment creation. You need to encourage the youth to create jobs for themselves. I mean, if government is not able to create enough jobs, to accommodate them. And I think we have to look into some of these emerging economies or areas. So talking about the green economy, the care economy, and the digital economy. The youth are now, they are good in terms of this. They have good IT skills. And so digital platform, care economy, this is very important because it does not only create direct employment opportunities, but it also spares the economic activity that leads to, employment creation in other related industries. The second one I will recommend will be in what we call the active labor market policies. And government need to implement such policies. So one, they can implement active labor market policies in combination with income support measures. So this can be done to tackle this youth unemployment or inactivity. Now, in order to make it more effective, they can be in the form of integrated packages. It should be a number, not just one package, but integrated. Integrated in the sense that it can be what? Combined employment services, which is very key. In fact, that even takes me to job training or job search assistance. A lot of these youth don't know where to go. So that's the reason why the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, I think they have public employment sectors across the region, so they can go there and then find out, what it takes to get a job, improve on their CVs. Some may not know how to go about it. So that is one. And then employment creation programs, very important. We need to create employment creation program, subsidized employment and wages. Some employers would want to recruit more of such youth, but probably they may, in terms of resources, they may not be able to, pay them. So if government can give subsidies to such employers that are ready to recruit more, I think it will help. And then also important, once we are talking about training as well as training, and then entrepreneurship promotion and self-employment. In fact, I think one of the, in the near future, or maybe in the subsequent days, we will be able to come up with what we call school-to-work transition.
Okay.
You see, the school-to-work transition gives an idea of how long it takes, for somebody to land a job when he or she completes education, either formal or apprenticeship. So all this graduate unemployment is as a result of they want to measure the period that it takes for one to complete school and to land a job. Here we are talking about stable job and employment job. That's what the literature. So stable job is getting job in formal sectors. But the other area is also self-employment. So you have finished school, you have some ideas, you are not getting job. Why don't you enter into some form of unemployment, create your own job? So, but then we need to, as it were, encourage them. Then investing in public education and training for expanding sectors. And so investing in quality public education. Because remember, we are talking about education here. Ghana, I think the country is doing well in terms of TVETs, but we need to do more, especially quality apprenticeship. Because the youth not being in education or training, the training is not only formal training, but apprenticeship is a kind of training that is able to land them into some form of job after that. And then maybe last but not the least, provide access to affordable credit. We know that getting access to credit is a challenge in this country. Where you will be required, the commercial banks will require you to bring collateral and all that. These youth don't have this. So we can support them in the form of startup capitals. Because some of them are innovative so that they can be entrepreneurs. They have entrepreneurial skills. So if you're able to support them with startup capitals, then they can bring out, their expertise in terms of innovations. And then maybe last but not the least, considering the youth employment outcomes in macroeconomic policy choices. So we need to advocate for macroeconomic policies that support better employment opportunities for young people. Also creating conducive enabling environment for youth engagement in development decision making, including in public service delivery. So yes, this group are at a disadvantage when it comes to entering the labor market. There are barriers, and so once we can put some of these measures in place, I think that we'll be able to reduce, this need rate. In the developed countries like Netherlands, Germany, Germany, they do well in terms of the TVET, acquiring the technical and vocational skills. So they have lower need rate, 9-10%. So I think that when we do same, we should be able to deal with these menace.
Right, Anthony Odro-Denchira, who is labor economist and statistician at the Labor Statistics Unit of the Ghana Statistical Service. Thank you so much for making time to join us this morning. As always, you guys are doing a great job. Continue that, and would always be supporting you to get the policy recommendations implemented. That's the most important thing. Thank you.